What's up guys, and welcome to another video. It's TMG, teaching you guys how to ruin your monsters effectively today. So last video we covered a Giant's Guide, and before we get into this video, I just wanted to start off and say thank you to all the participants that helped with the Light Unigami event. We helped a lot of people get their light units on Sunday. Really awesome experience, and I just wanted to take some time to say thank you to all of you who came in and spent your valuable energy to help other players and of course help yourselves too in the meantime. So in this video, I wanted to take some time because this is probably the question I get most often, on YouTube or on Twitch is, how to ruin your monsters. Or when I'm doing monster reviews that I do, every day. This is probably the most common scenario that I run into, or the biggest setback for players, across the board. So I wanted to take some time in this video and teach you guys how to effectively ruin your monster. So the goal of this video is not to get into super advanced builds and crazy stuff that you guys are going to probably run into late game, Guardian 1, 2, 3, etc. This video is to prep you guys from beginning of the game all the way to the beginning of end game before things start to get a little interesting. So if you guys are anywhere within that window, this video is going to help you immeasurably. So let's talk about this. So I'm going to tell you guys a couple of the strategies that I like to use, and certain things. I'll give you guys different stuff like how you should enchant your runes, to what power levels they should be depending on their grade, specific stuff like that. But we'll go real in depth with everything from start to finish. So hopefully we can clear up some confusion and help you guys get to the next stage in your game. Because fortunately for you guys, runes in this game are the most important aspect of this game. Not particular monsters per se, but runes. So if you have any issue that you're running into, TOA, dungeons, PvP, anything, most likely the first cause of the issue is going to be rune setup and rune type. So if I was, let's say, building my Rainbow Mon here that you guys are staring at in the face with his little wings, right? There's a couple of things that I like to look at first, or a couple of questions that I like to ask myself when I'm building a particular monster. The first question is, what type of monster is he? Obviously, for the sake of this video, he's a material type monster, but we're not going to get into that. Typically, what's going to happen is you're going to have an HP type, you're going to have defense, you'll have HP, or support, and attack. There we go. And depending on the type of monster that you have will typically determine how you're going to build this particular monster. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Monsters like Zeros, the Fire Dragon, or Beretta. Monsters that have, multiple ways to build them, even though they're, let's say, attack-type monsters. But we're not going to get into those specific instances today. I just wanted to give you guys a general guide. So, let's, for instance, say, let's go over attack type first, since typically this is what you guys are running into most of the time. Okay, so attack type. So attack type monsters, as you guys already know, there's 6 rune slots, right? And a lot of the times it's real easy to get confused in this game because you'll hear people say, oh, slots 2, 4, 6, or they'll give you, you're like, oh, how do I rune the mischievous bat? And they're like, attack, or attack crit damage attack, or attack whatever, right? And you're like, what the hell are you talking about, right? Especially if you just started the game, you have no idea, right? But typically what happens is people will give you 3 stats, right? And those 3 stats usually apply to slots 2, 4, and 6. So slots 2, 4, and 6 are going to be where all of your runes, your beefy runes go. Slots 1, 3, and 5 are only going to be flat rate runes. So I'll show you guys here. So there's the 5 slot. It's, always plus HP. Slot 3 is always plus defense. And slot 1 is always going to be plus attack. Now the substats we'll get into in a bit, but those always vary. Okay, slots 2, unless it's speed, will always be a percentage, okay? So there'll always be a percentage, and you never, ever want want a flat stat, so like HP plus 70 or attack plus 22 or whatever, in slots 2, 4, and 6. You never want that. You severely limit the capabilities of your monsters. I made the mistake in the beginning of this game thinking that all I had to do was get a bunch of nat 5s or natural 5-star monsters, basically monsters that can be summoned as, a 5-star. And that's what I thought you had to do, so I didn't care too much about runes. I just put whatever on there. You know, if it looked right, then I just threw it on. I was like, whatever. And I was still getting my ass curb stomped in the arena, and I didn't understand why. And, you know, like I said before, like, again, guys, the most important part of this game is runes, okay? So that's basic stuff. Now, after I figure out or I discern what type of monster I'm going to be working on, so let's say we're working on an attack type monster, there's a couple of things. So first I want to talk about the most common mistakes so you guys can look at your box and see if this is something that you might have done. I've done it, so it could be a possibility. Most common error I see players doing, other than putting flat stats in slots 2, 4, and 6, is they're building monsters what I like to call monostructural or monostat, or one stat across the board, meaning in slot 2, you'll have, let's say, if we were building a... Actually, no, we'll just stay with attack. So, let me get out of Swift here. See if I got some attack percent runes around here somewhere. Come on, attack percent. Oh, bro. The struggle's real. The struggle is real. There we go. Boom. Okay. So, let's say I had attack percent, right? Most common thing I see players do is they'll put attack percent in slot 2, they'll put attack percent in slot 4, and they'll put attack percent in slot 6, okay? Now that's good if you're a beginner, okay? It's okay. Well, it's not good, but it's all right. It'll hold you over, and it'll allow your monster to deal, you know, a decent amount of damage, but you'll never see the numbers that you want to see with building your monsters like that. And that applies across the board, whether it's HP, HP, or defense. Especially if you're looking for damage, that type of build is typically going to create a wall for you very early from the beginning of the game, essentially. So when you're building attack type monsters, there's something that's going to happen for you, and this foundation will set the cornerstone for every single build that you do from here on out. So when you're building attack type monsters, the trick is this, guys. You're going to pay attention. So obviously you're going to put attack in slot 2, right? As a basic build. You're going to put crit rate in slot 4. And the reason why is this. The reason why you're going to put crit rate initially in slot 4 is because every time your character lands a critical rate or lands a critical hit, what happens is that they deal 50% more damage. So right, every time you land a critical attack, see this critical damage rating here, that's 50% more damage that you're dealing. When you're dealing 50% more damage, that offers you a unique opportunity to hit hard, right? And that's where all your damage essentially is going to come from. So you'll have crit rate here, right? Because then you're improving the chance that increased damage is going to happen. And then you'll put attack percent in slot 6. Now, again, guys, the reason why you're doing this, right, instead of attack, is let's take that same 5-star rune that we just looked at, this despair rune here. Attack percent runes at 5-star max out at 51%. So if you plus it all the way to 15, that's 51% more damage that you're going to be dealing, right? Which makes sense. Now, the reason why you're not going to put that same attack percent rune in slot 4 is base, your monster with no runes automatically deals 50% more damage anyway if he lands a critical hit. Does that make sense? So if your crit damage is 50 and you're still putting an attack rune in slot 4, you're basically it's a wasted rune if you understand what I'm saying. Whereas if you put an increased rate, critical rate, and then you had just like more attack or more crit damage, etc. for like substats, which we'll talk about here in a second, your monster will deal a ton more damage, and you'll be able to take advantage of the situation for what it is. So that's why I recommend crit rate in slot 4 to begin, and then attack percent in slot 6 as you know, obviously as you're building your unit. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about before I tell you what slot 4 is typically going to transition into, specifically for attack type units, the next thing we're going to talk about is substats. Okay. Let me find a rune that's not been enchanted yet at all. Okay, so for instance, for this rune, so I'm looking at defense percent, so we're going to pretend this says attack. But the substats you guys see here, the first one, you see it says resistant revenge rune. So any rune that comes with a prefix like resistant, strong, whatever, means that it comes with a stat that's already predetermined underneath the main stat. Now the predetermined stat, for instance, on resistant revenge runes, is resistance. Now that stat will never, ever go up, ever. No matter how much you enchant it, whatever the fuck, it will never go up, okay? So, upon receiving the rune, understand that if that stat is a rune that you, or excuse me, if that stat is a stat that you really want, so for instance, let's say that I wanted speed, and because I'm trying to build a speed monster. And speed is like if I got a quick revenge rune is the prefix, but if it was a quick revenge rune, then that lets me know that speed substat is never going to go up, and that lets me know that could potentially be a bad investment for me. So that's a nice way to judge. So always remember that. So if, again, like, I feel comfortable with this rune being resistance on there because I know that that's not going to go up, so I don't have to worry about rolling a resistance roll between accuracy and crit rate. Okay. So when you're powering up a rune, substats are going to be the most important thing in the game. So main stats are only going to take you so far on your rune. So whether it's defense percent or attack percent or whatever, they'll only take you so far. The second portion of runes and their power rely all about substats. So the next question you're going to ask yourself, guys, is when you're building these units or you're shopping runes or you're farming runes or whatever, you're always going to ask yourself, whatever monster you're looking at building, what 3 stats are going to be most important for that particular unit? So for instance, if, because we're pretending that this defense, let's pretend that that defense is attack percent, what 3 stats on an attack type monster would I find most valuable? And to me, that's going to be attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, and of course, tailing behind that is speed, because we're currently in a speed meta, and you want your monsters to have more opportunities to attack, if you get what I'm saying. So I'm looking at attack percent, crit rate, crit damage. Those are the 3 things that I'm looking at building no matter what, right? So after you've determined if that rune is going to be valuable or not valuable based on what you're building, then you go ahead and power it up. If the rune does not have those stats that you want for your particular unit, I wouldn't even waste a dime. Not a dime on it, seriously. So when you're powering up runes, they have a chance, any of the substats, obviously except for the one that's prefixed, has a chance to go up. Now, on magic runes, the blue color runes, they typically come with 2 stats, right? And what I recommend is really only dealing with runes that are like magic or above. White runes, you never know what you're going to get. So especially if you're shopping or you're buying from the shop, it could be a bad decision, if that makes sense. It could cost you 500k for a rune that turns out to be the worst rune you've ever pulled in your life. So for me personally, I only like to deal with runes that are magic and above. So blue, purple, or orange. That's it. So I think it's like purple's like epic and like orange is legendary or some shit. I don't even remember what they're called, but blue, purple, or orange. That's all I like to deal with. The reason being is because on magic, you can see the 2 stats, the first 2 stats that are going to go up. Legend is 3 stats that are going to go up. Or sorry, not legend, but the purple is going to be 3 and orange is going to be 4 or 5, depending if the rune comes with its own prefix or not. So, and then so on +3, on magic runes, the 2 runes that are listed, obviously under resistance, those are the 2 stats that are going to go up. So in this case, accuracy went up. And depending on what stat goes up for you guys, that's going to let you know where this rune is going to go. Right, so accuracy went up, so that lets me know right out the gate that it's going to go on a unit that I need to be obviously accurate in land effects. So I had a double pop in accuracy, so now at +9 I'll get another stat, and then at +12 I'll get another stat. On let me see here, on the purple runes, we're just gonna on the purple runes typically it's 3 stats. So those 3 stats that they show you let you know that those 3 stats are the ones that are going to go up. So if, let's say if this was attack, crit rate, crit damage on a purple rune, attack, crit rate, or crit damage are the 3 stats that are going to go up. If it's legend, then you have an opportunity for any of those 4 stats to go up, and you have an opportunity for one of those stats to go up 4 times. And to show you guys what that looks like when you get a legend rune, I'll show you my Zeros here. And he had this despair rune here, he had a 4 pop in crit damage, so 30% crit damage. And, you know, just to give you guys an example of what that looks like. So ideally, of course, in a perfect world, guys, you are going to want Obviously, all legend runes with awesome substats. But, just treat it like, you're getting gear over time. So, now that you guys kind of got like a basic of how substats kind of work, so I talked about attack percent in slot 2, crit rate in slot 4, and attack percent in slot 6 for attack type monsters. So when does that change to crit damage? Now that you guys understand, have a basic understanding of how substats work, when you're looking at your runes and you're enchanting them, like let's say we're building this guy to deal some massive damage, right? Obviously he has crit rate, but what I want him to do is I want him to have as much crit rate and crit damage as possible through his substats, okay? So I already have a crit rate in slot 4, so we're saying his crit rate's probably like 60%, 70%. Ideally, what I'm looking at is when I'm pulling runes, again, guys, blue runes or above, like obviously if you have to take a white rune for a filler, fine. But on the blue runes or above, you're looking for crit rate stats, right? Because when you enchant that rune the first 2 times or 3 times, you want the crit rate or crit damage to go up, or the attack, things like that. And by doing that on, the rest of your runes, other than slot 4, what's going to happen is you're going to build crit rate on those other runes, and that's going to leave you a high crit rate pool. And ideally, what I recommend is that you build that crit rate pool so high because once you get that crit rate to 60% without the use of your 4th slot, then you can change that 4th slot to crit damage. And what that crit damage, I might as well show you guys Zeros, so here's an example. Once you guys get the crit rate to that threshold, then you switch it to crit damage. And then when you have crit damage, you're going to be looking for substats like crit rate. Obviously, that defense plus 14 is terrible. Defense plus 7% is terrible. But the attack, like I said, the attack percent is there. The crit rate is there, right? So that way you can still offset it. You still have a crit rate that is as high as possible. And your crit damage, you maximize. And that's how you start putting up numbers like 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000, right? Just an example. Exaggeration, but just an example. And and what I see most players running into or doing is that they'll be building units attack, or defense, and then they run into a wall, and your monsters aren't dealing enough damage, etc., whatever. But typically when you get into a snag, it's 2 things. Your monsters aren't hitting hard enough, or you're not managing the effects of the battle efficiently enough, or a combination of both. You increase the damage, that increases the speed of your run. You increase the efficiency of your team, that just increases everything, right? So that's something that you guys will look at in terms of runes. So that's basically what you'll do with attack. So once you understand how to rune attack type monsters, everything else is relatively simple other than support types, which are the most complex types, and we'll talk about that here in a few. But first, just to give you guys a real sample spread, so now that you guys understand attack, right? So attack, crit rate until 60% crit rate without the 4th slot, then crit damage, and then obviously slot 6 is going to be attack percent as well. Now when we're looking at defense type monsters, right? Most of the time, let me find a defense type monster, Golem, right? Most of the time on defense type monsters, they're going to be runed just like attack type monsters, obviously minus the attack percent. So you'll notice here, he stuns the enemy, 25% chance, provokes with a 10% chance, and the attack power increases as his defense increases. Okay? So same thing. So that lets you know that this particular monster, or any defense type monster that has a skill that scales with defense, lets you know that their damage is based on how high their defense characteristic is. So in this situation, if you want your defense type unit to deal massive amounts of damage, you are going to put defense percent in slot 2, crit rate in slot 4, defense percent in slot 6. Okay, you're going to shop the substats. Same thing. Ask yourself what kind of what kind of stats do I need to make this unit deal as much damage as possible. Well, he needs defense percent because his damage scales with defense. He needs crit rate. He needs crit damage. So again, slot 4 crit rate until he gets his crit rate high enough, above 60%, and then you'll switch that 4 slot rune to crit damage. Now you have this defense type unit dealing all the damage that he needs based on his defense, and he's putting up big numbers. And because he's a defense type unit, he has natural survivability because he can take more hits than your average, let's say, attack type monster, your average squishy, toilet tissue monster or whatever. So, that's the basic format that you guys are looking at for attack type monsters, defense type monsters. HP type monsters, no surprise. So again, perfect example here. The Bearman. Bearman. Dark Warbear is the only monster in the game right now that has 3 skills that scale all with HP. All 3 of his skills, even after he awakens, scale with HP, right? Which he's going to be awesome for live PvP when it comes. Yes, I said live PvP is coming. Yes, 3-star arena is coming. It's arena where 3-star and below is coming, but that's another topic. We'll get into that later. But he is a perfect example of what, an HP bruiser type or damage type monster. Now, again, across the board, HP percent in slot 2, crit rate or crit damage in slot 4, HP percent in slot 6. Why? Because his skills, his damage, proportionate to his max HP, and then damage proportional to his max HP. Again, so his damage is based on how high his HP is. So you're going to build him with a lot of HP, but now you're going to maximize on the fact that he can deal damage by increasing his crit damage. So that way, every single time he crits, right, he's going to get that 50% increased damage, that 100% increased damage. And then eventually, reference to Zeros again, his crit damage will look like that. And then you'll have, 82% or 100% chance to deal, 200% more damage. So, that's how you're going to build your damage type units based on their type. It's really simple, guys. You got to get out of the mono stat build. So like like attack, defense. It's terrible. It's slowing you down in ways that you wouldn't even understand. And the reason why, when you're doing double stat builds, it's just a lot more efficient. Will you get into triple stat builds later? Yes. Will you get runes so insane that you might even be able to pull a mono stat build and still have all the substats and cover all the bases, especially with grindstones now in the raid? Yes, of course. But again, guys, I want to get you to that point so you have a foundation in place so you can build from a strong position. So, and this is how you get to that position, guys. So that's what you guys are going to look at. Again, so just to rehash before we get into support types, because support types are the most tricky types to build. Just to rehash, guys, always ask yourself, what do you want your particular unit to do? Okay, look at their type. Are they attack, support, HP, or defense? Look to see if their skills scale with their particular stat, other than support, of course. Does their heal scale with attack power? Does their damage just scale with defense, or does it scale with HP? Look at that, and then after you have that, then you'll know how to build them, whether they're going to be attack, crit rate, attack, crit damage, attack, etc., all the way down the line. After you have that in your mind, then you'll shop substats, guys. Shop your substats. Please shop your substats. You got to get out of the mind frame of just looking at the main stat. If the main stat is good, great. But if the substats are bad, the rune is bad. I promise you, the rune is shit. And you'll end up replacing it. Now, understand that if you guys are going to be putting runes in as a filler, fillers are fine. Fillers are great. But remember where you put them. Because you will replace them. Because your substats, oh man, if your substats are bad, it could get ugly really fast. So find out in your mind what 3 substats or 2 substats or however many on your rune that you need are going to help your monster be the best that it can be. Period. And then once you have that, now you know what kind of substats should go in your monster. So for instance, if it's an attack type, it needs attack, crit rate, crit damage. Defense type, and defense damage type, defense percent, crit rate, crit damage. And then speed obviously is always great on all units. And then, HP type, then it needs HP percent, crit rate, crit damage. There's other substats, resistance, accuracy, shit like that will come into play later. Again, guys, this is just a basic rune build type deal. Couple of pointers, though, that will carry over. Accuracy pretty much is good on almost all units if they're applying negative effects. Speed, like I said, is always good. Resistance is just going to come into play later, like much, much later. So we're not even going to talk about resistance today. So now that I've given you guys like a basic rehash, the next thing we're going to talk about are support type units. So support type units are really tricky, okay? Because a lot of the support type units in the game are hybrid. They typically have pretty good base stats and can be ruined any kind of way. Whether you want to ruin them with defense percentages, HP percentages, attack percent, whatever you want typically. Since we're looking at the Win Harpu right now, let's check her out. So her third skill, when she awakens, summons a whirlpool, inflicting damage on all enemies and reducing their attack bars by 40%, right? So I'll let you know right out the gate. She's not going to have like any skills that scale with anything, but she's applying negative effects, right? So she's just basically a simple unit, right? Now, on support types. Typically, what you're going to look at is support types are usually going to be the fastest type units you will ever have in your box. Mainly because most support type units offer buff scenarios. They influence the battle. For instance, like this Rune here, who's also a pretty good unit for TOA and a very good unit for Giant Speed 10, if you guys want to run a 2-star squad. She influences battle, right? So you typically want units that influence battle or support your team moving fast, because they have a direct influence on the efficiency of the rest of your units. So, for instance, instead of going like an attack, crit rate, crit damage, or, you know, defense, crit rate, crit damage, etc., you're typically looking for other skill sets. And this is where in slot 2 speed becomes very, very valuable. Your support type units you usually want going first or very close to first. So that's where you'll put a speed rune in slot 2. No matter what, you know, rune build you want, whether it's, you know, violent focus or whatever, and we'll get into rune types later. But I just want to give you guys a basic understanding, and then we'll give you guys sample rune builds to help you guys determine how to rune, you know, whatever monster based on their skill sets. But typically, you'll want speed in slot 2. You'll typically put HP percent in slot 4, so you can give them some survivability. And then in slot 6, you'll go either accuracy, if they have skills that influence combat. So for her, attack bar reduction. So you'll appreciate at least 60% accuracy on her. Or you can go HP percent or defense percent. HP and defense are kind of interchangeable. It just kind of depends. If it's more defense, then, you know, she could take more hits. If it's more HP, she's going to, you know, survive longer. But they're kind of hand in hand. But the trick is whichever one you decide, whether it's accuracy, HP, or defense percent in slot 6, you need to make sure that your substats offset that. So if you have HP percent, then you want accuracy, defense percent substats. Does that make sense? Because no matter what, that's where you're dipping in all the pools and you're making the most of your unit and what they can do. Because it doesn't matter what your support unit's skills are if they don't stay alive. Okay? So that's what you're looking at in slots 2, 4, and 6. And that's, you know, that's something really, really basic for, you know, the Rune. So, or not really the Rune, but for support units in general that you can look at. And it literally, it applies across the board. So whether it's the Rune, whether it's what other support units I got here, whether it's Chasun, whether it's you know, your Rune Penguin, you know, dope unit. You know what I mean? Like, he's a HP type, but he's typically a support type. Whether it's, you know, you got, you know, whoever, pick a support type unit, and most of the time, most likely, you are going to want them to go first because they all have skills that will make or break the battle, period. And you know, and that's a real general way to look at it. Now, let's talk about rune types. Because, you know, rune types is a huge question that, you know, I get a lot, guys. I get it a lot. What should it be? Should it be violent this? Should it be despair? Should it be fatal? Should it be whatever, right? Now, the trick that I like to use when I'm trying to decide how to rune my monsters. If I'm looking at a monster, for instance, since we're looking at the Warbear right now, if my monster has 2 AoEs, or 1 AoE in some other type of crowd control, then I'll rune them despair almost every time. Mainly because I think opportunity. So with AoE type monsters, despair is usually my first choice, typically because it offers me the opportunity to control the battlefield in more ways than one. Because then you're putting on things like speed and all this other jazz. Because, like, let's say, you know, for the Dark Warbear, he's a bruiser type, right? HP, so he'll be HP, crit rate, crit damage, HP, right? If I have him on a despair build, and he's with his 2 AoEs, or 1 AoE, or however many AoEs he has, The biggest thing is that if he doesn't deal enough damage to kill the enemy but still lands a stun, that affords me another opportunity to clean up with my other, the other members of my team. So that's what I look at. So for versatility and AoE type units, I recommend Despair, or that's how I build them. Could you build them violent? Of course you could, especially if paired with somebody who breaks defense. Could you rune them fatal or rage or whatever? Yes. It just depends on the type of team that you're building. That brings up a good point. So like if I'm building a pure damage type like Zeros, like I have him Despair, of course, just for the double AoE and TOA, of course. But like, could you build him Rage if you just wanted to just blow his load and kill everything all at one time? Of course, if you want to maximize on damage. Could you build him Violent because you want to maximize on his turn so he can reset cooldowns on his third skill? Of course. It just depends on what you're doing with your team. And that's, honestly, it's going to boil down to the skills of that particular unit and what you're going to do with that. So that's how I like to look at it. Typically, units that have skills like the Wind Penguin, who's one of the best units in the game right now. Wings of Wind, who removes a harmful effect from allies and decreases their skill cooldown by 1 turn each. All day I'm putting a unit like that on Violent, because units like that change something in combat very, something crazy like that, I want them to have as many turns as possible. So when you want a unit to have as many turns as possible, you're looking at lots of speed, so speed in slot 2, and Violent. Mainly because Violent gives you the most opportunities, combined with a high speed rating, to have as many turns as possible. So that's something, and he's a perfect example for that. And that rule can apply to anybody. If you have units that ignore defense, if you have units that have a heavy multiplier on one of their skills, multiplier meaning how much damage that skill does. Violent can be very, very, very valuable in terms of making sure that your team gets the most or the biggest bang for their buck in terms of actions used. So that's what I look at for that. What else? Okay, and then you have the other runes that are like 2 sets, like Focus, Blade, shit like that. Nemesis, Will. We're not going to get into Nemesis and Will because that's more late in game, and we're not even going to talk about that. But the basic stuff like Focus. Focus, obviously, if you need more accuracy, I recommend Focus on your support type units that need to land negative effects because it's a free 20% accuracy. Units like your damage units, like your basic damage units that are dealing damage based on HP, defense, all that jazz are always going to be Blade, no matter what. Extra 12% crit right out the gate, especially with good substats, is a nice way to get your crit rate as close to 100 as possible, 100% as possible right out the gate. So that's what I recommend for that. Revenge is another one that's really good that you guys will start to get mid-game as you guys start to farm dragons. Revenge is another one. Revenge, my criteria for Revenge is that skill 1 has to apply a negative effect that matters, or it has to do something that matters. I would never put Revenge on a unit that doesn't do shit in skill 1. So for instance, Mav, for example. When I get good Revenge runes, these energy runes will change to Revenge. Why? Because on his first skill, he has a chance to stun, 20% chance to stun. So that harmful effect rate goes up once you max the skills, and every time he gets hit, since he's so sturdy, if he counterattacks, he has a chance to stun, which offers an opportunity to control the battle. And that's just some key stuff that you guys can kind of look at. But just always pay attention. Ask yourself, what do the runes do? What's my objective? What do I hope to accomplish, in the battle, in the game, in the dungeon, whatever it is, and get that done. And that's how, essentially you'll effectively rune your monsters. So across the board, there's a nice little transition that I like to follow, guys, and I'll give this for you. So for attackers, you'll start with Fatal Blade, then you'll move into Violent or Rage, and that's the general progression that I like to do. So Violent Blade, Rage Blade, and then Violent Blade, Rage Blade will turn into Violent Revenge or Rage Revenge. Okay. Support type units, I like to start with all energy if I don't have access to anything else, and then it'll switch to Swift Energy, Swift Focus, Swift Nemesis, Swift Shield, Swift anything for that matter, or Swift Revenge, like if you have an Archangel and they're removing beneficial effects, things like that. And that's what I like to do for support. My defense type will typically either be Violent or Swift if I want them to be fast, but typically they follow the same structure as the attack builds. And, all the way down the road. And that's a real smooth way, guys. I'm telling you, ruining your monsters is the most important thing in this game, guys. And if you can crack this code, like, the game will become so much easier to you. So just make sure, guys, double check all of your monsters. Watch this guide. Share it with your friends. Look at your runes and make sure they are where they need to be, and you guys will be awesome. I'm telling you, you guys will just be awesome. Now, are there variations? Of course. Like, for instance, Mav. He's the HP type, and he doesn't deal HP damage. On those type units, guys, then you're fine putting like HP in slot 4 or one stat all the way around, especially if they're not dealing damage. But for any other unit that's dealing damage based on a particular stat, make sure that you're allowing them the opportunity to deal damage. Now, like I said, guys, there are exceptions to the rule. And if you guys have any questions about your particular units, be sure to drop that question in the comments box below about your particular monster. I talk Rune Shop all day long, and I love to learn about your box and all that good stuff. But that's it, guys. So that covers everything that I wanted to talk about for runes. Hope this helps you guys take your game to the next level, because runes are so important. And hope to see you guys at the top. Thank you guys so much again for your help on Sunday with the Light Dungeon. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.